What if you could turn your passion for helping others into a career that changes lives, starting with your own? Join Empower's Certified Professional Empower Coach Academy, accredited by the ICF and powered by Oregon State University. Our next cohort begins February 28th. Visit yesempower.com to reserve your spot today.
Welcome to Rewired. I'm your host, Tiffany Grimes with Empower Coaching and Training. Welcome back to Rewired, the podcast where neuroscience meets real change. I'm your host, Tiffany Grimes, and today we're diving into a topic that is both deeply personal and profoundly leadership shaping. And that topic is boundaries. And I want to start with just my own, one of many stories. I have a particular person in my family who I have known for many, many years has very toxic traits. And over the years, I ignored my own red flags about this person. I told myself stories that accepting the statements, the behaviors, the interactions were just part of being a good family member, that I should just shut my mouth. Like literally, I would tell myself that, Tiffany, just shut your mouth. Don't say it. Don't ruin it. This is a nice setting, just whatever, get through it and get through the other side. And after a long while, what I noticed is I started having this deep resentment. I'm teetering on saying hatred, but maybe like loathing, making up lies so that I didn't have to be around that person, and really kind of giving a whole lot of power away in the shutting my mouth practice that I was living into. And so again, there are 1,000 examples where I could talk about boundaries. And this is one that I think was monumental in my own work of finally diving into literature, work around Melissa Urban, work around Brene Brown, work around Nedra Glover Tawwab. Some really great work out there around boundaries. And I went diving into the deep end because I just felt it. I felt it in the inside that I was not living in alignment with my boundaries. It was becoming clearer to me that I wanted to do something different in this relationship that I was feeling kind of forced into, and also being really clear that I didn't want to create big divides that wasn't worth it to me. And yet I knew I needed to do something different. So I'm going to kind of use that as our example today as we talk through this. But if that is hitting home with you, where you have been in that place where you've just felt like, ooh, I know I'm letting some blurry lines happen right now around my boundaries, and I can feel it. I feel gross. I feel like I'm limiting myself. I feel like, well, I think anytime that I can hear myself say, Tiffany, shut your mouth, that I'm learning, that's a red flag. I can lean into that and go, no, that's something, let's go a little deeper there and figure out what's going on. So whether you're a leader, parent, a family member, a coach, a partner, just a human navigating everyday life where people love us to blur our boundaries. It's so much easier when we stop living in alignment with our values and our boundaries. And it's so encouraged, in fact, to blur, to eat the thing you don't want to eat, to drink more than you want to drink, to talk gossipy around other people, to, blur who you are and who you want to be. And so boundaries are the scaffolding that really allow us to show up in our own life with clarity and energy. And I think the most important word I want to put in this is integrity. To be able, for me, to lay my head down at the end of the night and not feel all those feelings of regret or living into these fantasies around like, oh, this is what I'd say, and this, imagining like telling somebody off and knowing, okay, there's something here that is off. And so boundaries give us that ability to go back and build scaffolding around a life that has integrity with who we are and who we want to be, how we want to be in relationship, how we want to walk the earth. And for so many of us, boundaries feel uncomfortable. They feel uncertain. They even feel selfish. Like I know in my example, like it's selfish for me to put up boundaries in this situation. My energy needs to be about the family's event and making sure everybody else feels okay. And so I can be left feeling like if I stand up for myself, then what a selfish thing I've done. I've ruined the night, right? So today we're going to learn how to rewire that story. And what I want to say is that this isn't going to happen in the next however many minutes we're here together, right? This is rewiring boundaries is a long, slow process because those are delicate and they're vulnerable pathways. When we kind of think about boundaries from this brain-based perspective, we're literally building new brain pathways. And so our own brain, our family, our work colleagues, all of those things will probably be working against us. And so it is very vulnerable work. So one, if you're going to listen to this and begin to do your own work around boundaries or continue your work around boundaries, I just want to say good work. This is an amazingly rewarding and also incredibly difficult journey. I have not one time regretted learning to live in alignment with my values, but boy, it's hard. It is definitely some hard work. And really, for me, it boils down to letting other people feel how they're going to feel and letting go of control. So today we're going to look at the neuroscience of boundaries. We're going to talk about why the brain resists setting boundaries, how boundary clarity reduces overwhelm. We're going to talk about skills for setting boundaries with ourselves, boundaries with others, and why they are actually an act of compassion towards others. How to coach others through boundary challenges, if that's part of the work that you do. And then evidence-based tools you can start using today. So let's dig in. This is some good work, especially this time of year. So let's talk about first the neuroscience of boundaries and why they actually calm the brain. So most people think about boundaries, think about them in the context of like relational or behavioral. I'm going to set this in my marriage or in my family, or it's something I'm going to do or something I'm going to say. But neuroscience tells us boundaries are first and foremost a nervous system regulation strategy. So think about that parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The brain loves predictability, and boundaries give the brain a map. When the brain lacks clarity, the amygdala, which is kind of our threat detector system, kicks into hypervigilance mode. So blurred boundaries equal kind of a perceived threat, if you will, for the brain. There's some really great research out of the Yale Stress Center that shows that ambiguity generates more stress than a predictable negative outcome. So even if we know we're going to go and we know exactly how it's going to go and it's going to be yuck when we leave, our brain prefers that over, oh my gosh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to set some boundaries and I have no idea how this is going to go. The brain will lean towards that predictable negative outcome. So it really takes some serious, genuine dedication, work, practice, love, compassion, all of those things to actually work in some ways like against our brain to really hold our boundaries and to speak those and to live into those. So unclear expectations drain cognitive resources, meaning that we want to care for ourselves as we are doing this work. We want to try to get a good night's sleep. We want to drink less. We want to eat well. We want to make sure we are hydrating and that we have a safe space to work through some of these conversations and some of the skill building and some of the feelings that will inevitably come along with this work. Boundaries are essentially, and this comes from the work of those amazing women that I mentioned earlier. There's a couple catchphrases that I really love and that I think about with boundaries. And so they are essentially, here's where I end and you begin.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Ready to make a real difference? Become a certified professional coach with Empower Coaching and Training. Our next CPEC cohort, accredited by the International Coaching Federation and offered in partnership with Oregon State University, starts February 28th. Spots are limited. Learn more at yesempower.com.
Here's what I can offer without burnout. So my yes meaning yes, not a yes that means no. And here's what is okay and what is not okay. So I love those three phrases for us to lean into. I especially love the one that comes from Brene Brown. Here's where I end and you begin. And I think about all the ways that just in that sentence alone, it might help us understand why boundaries are so difficult. We think about, a marriage is like, if it's a, two-person marriage, it's like, it's half of me and half of you. And that, just kind of the setup of it, right? Of like where two people become one, or a family where if we're a parent and we are always, the kind of expectation is that we're putting our needs second to the family need, to the family unit, to the kids' needs, to the schedules, all of those things. So we can see culturally it's set up in this way where this idea of holding space for who I am as a partner, as a mom, as a family member, there is still a me in there. And there is a space between where I am and where you are. And so how are we maintaining that? And culturally, how do we carve that out and find that and keep it healthy and meaningful and beautiful in a society that might constantly be pushing us to blur that space in between? So this clarity reduces cognitive load, creates emotional safety, and restores executive functioning as we start to practice it. In the beginning, it feels like just a shitstorm of emotions and confusion and selfishness for most of us, I think. But in the end, we can think about it for our brain as, I'm giving my brain a target. This is where I am. This is where we are. This is where you are. And let's get clear about those boundaries. This is what is okay with me, the way that I will behave, what I will listen to, what I will not listen to, words that are okay to be around, words that are not okay to be around, judgment, and all of those things to say, this is not okay with me, and this is what is. And so as I give myself the target meaning, as I practice this over and over and over again, and I have these new neural pathways that are being created, it reduces my cognitive load because it just becomes my new norm. I'm not having to put so much energy into literally thinking through the whole process. The other part of it is that boundaries activate the prefrontal cortex. So that part of our brain that's responsible for thinking and creativity and emotional intelligence and self-regulation and all of those things, it activates that portion of your brain. When we name a boundary, so this is okay with me, this is not okay with me, we shift the brain from reactivity to regulation. So we shift it from emotional brain to reasoning brain. So I'm in a conversation, I'm hearing people starting to maybe make some stereotypes around gender or some comments that are leaning towards sexism or racism or any of the other isms, and they feel really uncomfortable. I'm in my emotional brain. I'm like, oh, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel safe. And when I go, oh yeah, this is not okay with me, I shift into reasoning brain and I go, this doesn't feel like a safe kind of conversation for me. So if this is going to continue, I just want to let y'all know I'm going to step away from this because I don't want to be part of a discussion like this, right? So we're not saying you have to stop. We're saying I'm not going to be around that. And so it allows us to move literally from one part of the brain to the other. This is why simply naming a limit can calm the nerve system. The other thing I want to mention is boundaries protect dopamine and energy systems. So chronic boundary violations. So again, I want to mention, my situation in like a family scene where we're together for hours and it is constant. It leads to decision fatigue, it's emotional depletion, it's dopamine dysregulation, it's a constant state of micro stress. And that's not just for when somebody is violating my boundaries. It's also when I am violating my own boundaries. So if I have boundaries around, I stop eating at 7 p.m. or I only drink on special occasions, or I look at myself and I remind myself that aging is normal and beautiful and all of those things rather than allowing myself to tear myself apart in the mirror. Those are self boundaries. And when I instead get in a mirror and start pointing out all of the things that come with 50 in a negative light, then I am costing myself, my energy, my ability to be in my prefrontal cortex, my dopamine regulation. I am activating my own threat system. So these micro stress activities accumulate quickly. There's a really great article in the Harvard Business Review from the 2023 journals that help us understand the accumulation of microstress, and that boundaries help metabolism, cognition, and motivation recovery. So even though they feel really, really hard, our whole system, our metabolism, our ability to think, our resiliency levels, all of those things, those insular cortex, the reticular activating system, they all benefit from us doing this amazingly loving hard work of boundaries. And yet, boundaries feel really hard. The brain science behind the discomfort of boundaries is really worth talking about. So let's reframe right up front. If boundaries feel hard, nothing is wrong with you. I often hear people say, I would do it, but I just feel so guilty. And to me, that is like exactly. It's exactly. And we have to be able to feel that and do it. We are people of our culture, of our society, of our upbringing. We are people pleasers. We are parents. We are sons and daughters and children and parents and all of these roles that we play. And selflessness is built right into all of those things as kind of the expectation. And so it immediately starts to feel like this feels wrong. Me holding space for myself feels wrong. And oh my gosh, what's everybody else going to think and how are they going to talk to me? So if you feel like, oh, this is so hard, you are exactly in the right place. Your brain is doing exactly what it is designed to do, because setting boundaries feels unsafe, right? So your brain goes, no, let's not do this because this feels unsafe. And my job is to keep you safe. So the social brain fears rejection. So humans are wired for belonging. We're hardwired for connection. So when we set boundaries, and again, our brains have been conditioned that these might be selfish and wrong, the amygdala, again, that threat center, interprets it as a potential threat to relationship stability, right? Like if I hold space, if I say it's not okay to talk to me like this, or it's not okay to touch me in this way or to do these things, what will happen to my relationship? Right? We immediately start to think about that. Research from UCLA calls this the social pain network. The same neural circuitry as physical pain is activated as it is when we're thinking about and practicing setting relational boundaries. So again, I just want to highlight, this is real. The pain and discomfort that comes with boundaries, it's real. Early conditioning shapes boundary discomfort. So we've talked about this, a lot already in our first, 12 minutes together. Neuroscience shows that boundary patterns often reflect attachment styles, family rules. So this idea of just be good, don't upset anyone. This was my shut up, Tiffany, just don't cause any waves. Survival strategies, just be quiet, take it, get through it, get to the other side. Cultural messages about obligation or self-sacrifice. Again, I am a mother, and my entry into motherhood was this. I had all these files that I didn't even know existed in my brain. Suddenly, I felt guilty about going to the gym to work out, asking for help, and all these things that I did not have any idea were even in there. But they are cultural, familial, societal messaging that is deep in our brain. And these patterns run automatically in the brain until we catch them, notice them, and consciously rewire them.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Ready to level up how you lead at work and at home? Empower Coaching and Training brings brain-based coaching, mindfulness tools, and real-world strategies you can share with those you serve and live with. Get started now. Visit us at yesempower.com.
High empathy brains struggle the most. So this might be you. This is me. Coaches, helpers, social workers, early educators, leaders with strong empathy. We often have a even harder time with this. So it's the kind of the over functioning of the empathy circuits and the over giving and saying yes reflexively. Of course I can do that. Of course I can bring that. Of course. I remember being in a class in my junior year of college, and we were creating this health and wellness fair, and I was super excited about it. I had all these ideas. And we were kind of creating this, people sign up, and I kept raising my hand. I'd wait for a moment. The teacher would say, well, who's going to do this? And I'd wait. And then there was such discomfort in the silence and people not stepping up. I'd raise my hand, and then I'd do it again. And then I'd do it again. And finally, my teacher said, okay, you're done. You're cut off. Somebody else, you have to step aside so that somebody else can step up. And you have to learn to sit in this discomfort of quiet. And I remember that moment so clearly of wow, I'm willing to just do all of this. I was also carrying a full load and working 2 jobs and signing up for everything. Ignoring internal clues. These are these high empathy brains. We're just ignoring all of these years of being in family situations of total discomfort and total exhaustion afterwards as cues that, hey, you could do something about this. Empathy without boundaries becomes exhaustion. And I definitely have experienced that and still experience sometimes. And empathy with boundaries becomes great role modeling, great parenting, great leadership, great partnership. We authentically give. We authentically spend time with people because we want to when we practice empathy with boundaries. Let's talk a little bit more about boundaries with ourselves. So this is the often missed foundation. We think about boundaries and we immediately think about, I've got to set boundaries with this person, with this job, with this role. But boundaries with ourselves are the first place we have to start the work. Boundaries with ourselves are really easily overlooked because maybe we aren't speaking them. Maybe we're the only one setting them and we're the only one keeping ourselves accountable. And maybe they're not that clear. Before we set boundaries with others, the brain must learn to set internal boundaries, limits on our own patterns. So examples of self-boundaries, again, I mentioned some of these earlier. They might look like, I don't check email after 7 p.m. So before we go telling anybody else that or holding them, holding some conversations about that, we have to actually live into that and practice that. I don't check my email after 7, which means I can't check my email after 7, right? I don't respond to text immediately. This is one of mine. I just feel like, thank you. I see it. I'm not going to spend my time while I'm in conversation with people, while I'm parenting, while I'm on vacation, while I'm doing these things. I'm just not going to respond to texts immediately. And I've really had to learn to hold that and let people feel how they're going to feel about it. Another example is I take a pause before saying yes. So maybe we just have a key statement we go to like, I love that idea. Let me get back to you tomorrow. And it gives us an idea, space to kind of play with whether or not we really want to say yes, whether we have the space for yes, whether we're giving authentically or it is just out of habit or out of should. I honor my break even when my work piles up. This is another example. I take my breaks. I see all the emails. I see all the things. I see all the messages. I see all the texts. And also, I'm a human being with a brain. I need to breathe. I will be more engaged. I will be more creative when I take my breaks, when I drink water, when I walk away from the classroom, from the computer, from the phone, from whatever it is. I am a better person when I come back. And think about how often we give up our breaks. So I have to hold myself accountable. I work at home. I work in my home office. I work with a ton of other people, but I do it from right here. It's really easy for me just to power through the day. And guess what happens? I'm exhausted and burned out by the end of it, especially if I do that several days in a row. I have to hold myself accountable to those things. Here's a neuroscience insight that I really loved to read about. And what it said was that when we set boundaries with ourselves, so some of these that I mentioned, again, you can set yours, others of mine are that I don't eat after 7, or I only have wine 3 days a week, right? These little things, I'm goal oriented. So these things for me are really helpful. When I set these with myself, I retrain my dopamine systems to associate follow through with internal safety rather than external approval. So I will have nights, I've been experimenting with drinking less and less and less as I get older and realizing, after a couple decades, like, oh, I have these systems that I've created in myself. Like something good has happened. Let's have a drink. I want to see a friend. Let's meet up for a drink. We're going to have a nice dinner, a romantic, let's have a drink, right? These like systems that we have in place. And so I was really trying to start to play with disconnecting those and really just having a glass of wine when I want a glass of wine, as opposed to like, it's 5 o'clock or I'm making dinner or whatever. It's Sunday. It's whatever it is. And so as I've lived into that, and I don't always get it for sure, but it's been a couple of years now I've been playing with this. And when I get it, I have the urge like, oh, I want a glass of wine. The kids just went to bed. It's quiet. I want to just have a glass of wine. But it's after 7. And also I know this weekend I'm going to have some drinks. And so I'm not going to drink right now. When I make it to the other side of that and I don't have a glass of wine, I feel so good about myself. I literally at the end of the night, I'm like, I did it. It feels good. I've set boundaries. I've strengthened self-trust. I said I wasn't going to, and I didn't. And I can trust myself that when the urge comes, I can ride that. I can surf that wave. It strengthens emotional regulation. I can feel that, that kind of emotional tug. There's joy, so let's have a drink. There's grief, so let's have a drink. There's a hard day, let's have a drink. And so I can just instead just be with those emotions. And then there's identity coherence. So this idea of I am a person who honors my boundaries. I am a person of my word with myself. So I'm living in integrity with who I want myself to be. So once we've really done the boundaries with ourselves and we've started practicing that, and again, that's the first place to start. So for you, be thinking about, what is a boundary that I want to set with myself? And practice. You don't have to wait for anybody else. Give your brain that target and start to think about, how do I support myself in this? Then, as we practice that and we build that muscle, we're going to start practicing boundaries with others and really thinking about that through the lens of compassion and clarity. Boundary research in positive psychology shows that the healthiest relationships include autonomy, clarity, predictable behaviors, and shared responsibilities. So this was profound to me when I first started doing boundary work years ago, is that boundaries are not walls. They're connection structures. They are in place in the healthiest of relationships. And I think I always unconsciously thought about them as, these are things that keep me away from other people, or things that other people need to stop doing around me, instead of, these are part of this really loving, healthy, beautiful, thriving relationship. So there's 3 categories of boundaries. We've got protective, so to prevent harm, like I won't tolerate yelling. Proactive, think about that, to preserve energy. So I'm not available during lunch hours, or I don't check emails after 7 or whatever it is. And then there's relational boundaries. So think about that in a way to strengthen connection. I feel closer when we schedule uninterrupted talking time. I think it would be lovely if we scheduled child-free date nights once a month, right? So these boundaries that we put in place, that regardless of what else is happening, we are investing in each other this way. Example, boundary phrasing. So just to kind of play with this, to be at my best, here's what I need. And again, I want you to listen to these through. These are things that I am going to do that are important for me, not things that you have to change or that you must stop. It's that if this happens, here's how I'm going to care for myself, right? So to be at my best, here's what I need. I need 8 hours of sleep. And so I'm going to leave that event early so that I get home and make sure I give myself that. Another phrasing example is, I'm available for this, but not for that. So I'm available for setup at the event, but not for takedown of the event. I went through this years event that we used to do at my children's school. And it was set up, it was months of work beforehand, but then there was this part around, then you have to stay and take the whole event down, which meant getting home at like 10:30, and it's on a Tuesday. And and so I just got to a place where I would start to say, I'm available for all the pre-work. I'm not available for takedown. And I didn't add any reasons or lie about anything. I just wasn't available for that. Here's what works for me. So I can meet on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Here's what works for me. I can do X, but I can't do Y. This is important to me, and here's why, right? So just ways that we are living into us. We keep it neutral. We can keep it kind. We can keep it without apology or over-explaining or trying to convince someone. They get to feel however they're going to feel. I'm available for setup. I'm not available for takedown. And that's that. And I don't have to tell you all the reasons, and I don't have to apologize. That's been kind of another layer of my work, is to remove I'm sorry, but I'm only available for this, right? To take that apology out and to know that what I am offering is of great value. So let's talk a little bit about how boundary setting rewires the brain. So every time you set a boundary, you strengthen the brain's self-leadership circuitry. So these key neural changes are an increased prefrontal cortex activation. So we mentioned that earlier, better decision making, better emotional regulation, and better clarity. It activates, I should say, it reduces activation in limbic hijacking, which is that amygdala. So we become less reactive, less resentful, less overwhelmed. Think about the amount of times we say yes to something and end up feeling reactive, resentful, and overwhelmed. It improves vagal tone. So from that, we can expect that we see reduced stress. We see a better heart-brain coherence, strengthening identity-based change. So you shift from I am someone who overdoes it. I always say yes when I mean no. I always overgive to I'm someone who honors my well-being. Think about that. If you worked from that standpoint, if you wholeheartedly believe that and own that, I am someone who honors my well-being, think about the boundaries we would put in place. Identity-based boundaries are the most sustainable. So when we work from that identity, I am someone who can be trusted to do what I say, right? I'm going to create beliefs, behaviors, develop my skills, create environments that support that identity. We already do that. It's just to uncover what is that identity, right? I'm a mother, and so I must say yes to my kids. Is that an identity, right? And if it is, for many of us, is it working? Are we feeling resourceful? We might feel overwhelmed. And so can I play with that? I'm a mother who honors my well-being because I know it makes me the best mom possible, right? Just shifting it, playing with it a little bit. Now, as many of you know, we are at Empower Coaching and Training, a coach training academy accredited through the International Coaching Federation. We are in partnership with Oregon State University. And so I can't talk about boundaries without also talking about directly to coaches. How do we coach through boundaries and use evidence-based approaches? Now, if you are not a coach, but you're a leader, you're a parent, you're a partner, you're still going to be able to utilize these things. So what we want to do is normalize. Your discomfort is your nervous system protecting belonging, right? So someone says, I want to set these boundaries. I'm overwhelmed. I'm exhausted, but I don't want someone to be mad at me. It feels so bad to do this. We normalize. This is your nervous system protecting you. This discomfort is normal. Explore the underlying value. So we might ask something like, what value is this boundary protecting? So I want to set boundaries around my time. What values is that time boundary protecting? Maybe it's health, maybe it's integrity, maybe it's family, and so forth. Help the client, or again, your child, your staff, identify their internal cue system. So boundary work requires that somatic awareness. We've got to have that metacognition, that awareness of I'm having a response to something. My body is telling me something. So what does it feel like when we know we've bumped up against our boundaries? Is there a tight chest? Is there pressure in the stomach? Is it fatigue? Is it an emotional place of resentment or irritability? What are these? And helping people identify them and name them. And then we can help folks use something called the boundary loop. So we've helped them identify the discomfort. And again, this is just powerful work that we begin doing with ourselves before we ever guide anybody through this. So you can think about this, doing it for yourself, or you can think about doing this with somebody else, depending on where you are in the boundary process. But notice the discomfort. So we've learned to understand these somatic cues that our bodies give, right? So we're noticing this discomfort. We're naming the need. So again, we might go back to say, like, what are the boundaries protecting, and talking about that a little bit for ourselves, or letting somebody else talk. What is the need? What is that core human need? Maybe we negotiate the limit. if we're in that boundary setting. So what is okay with me and what is not okay with me? And then we navigate the relationship afterward. So once I've set this in place, then what? People get to feel however they get to feel. I don't have to, setting boundaries doesn't have to be this like deep line we draw in the sand, and that if you touch it, you're a bad person and this relationship's over, right? Bumping up against people's boundaries is bound to happen. And so thinking about, okay, then how do I lean into that relationship? Not giving away my boundary, but saying, so I notice that this is happening and I really care about you. And I also care about my own well-being. And so I'd love to talk about this, right? So we call that the boundary loop. We want to think about using micro boundaries to build confidence. So what are the small wins? Where are the places we can begin to set this up? We probably don't want to start with this major boundary with this family member that we have to be in, that maybe we don't start there. Maybe the boundary is a small one. And in fact, we know we're going to have more success if we start with a small daily practice that helps retrain the brain. So examples might look like a 5-minute decompression before moving from one task to another. So again, I work at home. So before I click out of my meeting and I open up that door, I just take 5 minutes to decompress, breathing. Maybe I stretch a little bit and I set that boundary for myself, delaying an immediate yes. I gave an example of that earlier. Using email boundaries. So maybe, again, we talked about 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or whatever it is. I had a colleague, this was years ago, and I sent her an email and I got a response that said, this email is so important to me, as are the people who are walking through the front door. To be able to tend to both and give my full attention, I check emails from, and she, it was like 10 to 11, 1 to 2, and then maybe 4 to 5 or something. And it was so lovely. I remember reading that and just thinking like, we could be really good friends. I loved that response. Another boundary is ending a meeting on time, starting on time and ending on time. I love this one and use it all the time. And it's, again, just these little micro wins that we can start to do. These create these neural wins that support larger boundaries. So we're building an awareness of greater comfort and the ability to keep this work going. So let's keep talking about practical tools and experiments for our Rewired listeners. So let's talk about a few more tools before we get out of here today. We're going to talk about 3 in particular boundary building practices that our Rewired listeners can start today. And I'm just going to say this up front. I would love to hear from you. How are you setting boundaries? How are you practicing these tools? What are tools that you've had success with? So please respond and let us know. I would love to hear from you, some of your own stories. So the first one is the resentment radar. So this is going to build that self-awareness. So if you feel resentment, and just think about the places that might be showing up, there is a boundary needing attention. If you are doing something through resentment, you can bet, and it's not that deep, where is the boundary being bumped up against? Is there a boundary that has been set? Has there been a conversation? No shame. It's just information. Okay, I feel resentment. Let me think about my boundaries here. And that can just be self-discovery, self-work. Go deeper and ask yourself that question. What is the boundary that needs attention here? Tool 2, this is the 2-line boundary script. So fill in, here's what I can do. Here's what I can't do in a situation. And thinking about that from, I would say, multiple lenses. So if you would have asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, in relationship to this toxic family member, what can you do? What can't you do? Well, what I can't do is disrupt my family. I can't not have this person be a part of it, right? But I could. I didn't want to pay that price. I didn't want to look at it head on. So look at your can'ts and think about those answers through the lens of well-being and compassion. So what can I do? Maybe I don't want to do it. Maybe I'll never do it. But what can I do? I can have a conversation with this person. I can stop blaming this person and instead saying, what do I need to do to protect myself when I'm in the presence of this person? Or so being really playing with that, because again, our brain is working against us in the beginning of this work. So ask it and then analyze it. What can I do? What can't I do? And then analyze that. 3 is the energy audit. I love this one. Make a list. The people, the projects, the responsibilities, the environments you're in, and then rate each one of these on a scale of 1 to 5 for energy given versus energy taken. And you can burn this after you do it if you feel like it's too vulnerable to have around. But just thinking about, for the people that I spend a lot of my time with, are those situations energy givers or energy takers? The projects that I'm involved in, the places I volunteer, the things that I have around my house that I put my time in, are these energy givers or are they energy takers? The responsibilities I have, the environments I'm in. For me, this came down to these family situations like, God, I am exhausted afterwards. I was checking out, like it was really, as I really started thinking about that, okay, where can I build some energy in this, right? We don't have to move this from a 0 to a 5, just like build the awareness and then think about what are these patterns showing me about where the boundaries need to shift? And these shifts can be small. These shifts can be those micro wins, right? Thinking about that. So the resentment radar, the 2-line boundary script, and the energy audit. Play with those, practice those, share with us, please. I'd really love to hear from you. Let's close the loop here. So I've talked a lot today about boundaries. Boundaries aren't barriers. They're bridges to healthier relationships, grounded leadership, and a calmer brain. Boundaries that we set for ourselves are sometimes really hard for other people. And we have to know that we love ourselves enough and that we believe in ourselves enough to do this really great, important work. So if you struggle with boundaries, you're in good company, friend. You are human. Struggling with boundaries is just a human condition. Boundaries are rewirable. They are learnable. And they are one of the most loving things you can do for your nervous system, for your identity, and for your relationships. Thank you for being here for episode 14 of Rewired. I can't wait to hear from you about how you personalize this one and from your stories that you share with us. If you want more work in the world of boundaries, please visit us at yesempower.com. We offer a couple workshops every year on it. I think we have one coming up. I'll put it in the show notes if we do. But I know for sure we have some really amazing professional certified coaches who work with people and couples and families and young people on learning to I would say learning the love language of boundaries is how I'd phrase that. All right, folks, be well and take care. Thanks for tuning in to Rewired, where neuroscience meets real life change. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd be so grateful if you take a moment to leave a 5-star review. Your feedback helps people discover the tools, insights, and inspirations they need to create lasting change. While you're leaving that 5-star review, please also subscribe and share an episode with a friend. Remember, the way you think shapes the way you live. Every intentional thought, every mindful choice rewires your brain and your life. So go live intentionally, live thoughtfully, and never underestimate the power of your own mind to transform your world. Until next time, this is Tiffany with Empower Coaching and Training. Stay curious, stay empowered, and keep rewiring for real change.
Every family has challenges, and every parent deserves support. At Empower Coaching and Training, youth and parenting coach Jasmine Chandler helps parents and young people find clarity, connection, and practical tools that make a difference. Visit yesempower.com to connect with Jasmine and explore our team of incredible coaches today.